Hi, my name's May Samali. I'm 22 and I go to Sydney University. The reason I guess I enrolled in the social justice conference Breaking Down Boundaries is because I have a real passion for public interest law and social justice issues, particularly areas like international law and human rights, which aren't explored much in the first few years of my degree. So I thought that by attending the conference I could learn more about the opportunities available in these areas, both academic and career-wise, and also meet people with similar interests. Probably the highlight of the conference for me was one of the main lectures that was with the big group. The topic was on corporate criminality and international law, which I found really to be a great synergy between corporate law, criminal law, and international law. The reason I found this lecture quite interesting was because it looked at emerging issues of law which aren't currently regulated. For example, how corporations have human rights responsibilities beyond the nation state in which they are. The fact that international law should be addressing these issues and evolving with the times to keep a tab on corporations. The lecture I also found interesting was on intellectual property rights, and it looked at the international regime for regulation of property rights. I find it quite interesting to have intellectual property rights included within the conference. However, because of the implications on third world countries and developing nations, the fact that a lot of the pharmaceutical companies are operating in the developing world and are coming up with kind of medicines that are the cure to a lot of these diseases, but then because of regulatory reasons, because of trade practice reasons, they aren't allowed to sell these inventions to the developing world and allow them to benefit from it. That was a really interesting issue that got explored. One of the workshops which I found really interesting, and this was in a more informal setting than the lectures, was a careers fair that was held. So we had representatives from all different organisations around Sydney, also New South Wales and broader Commonwealth. Everything from the public sector to representatives of the bar, so women and men that were barristers. We had also people from community legal centres like Redfern Legal Centre. We had members of NGOs more broadly, Amnesty International, and here we got to speak to representatives of a broad range of areas and ask them about internship opportunities, ask them about career opportunities, something which we don't really get to do during our law degree at university because there is more a focus on theory, and this allowed us to take that theory and put it into practice and see what opportunities are out there in line with our interests. Hearing from people speak, hearing from women who have been at the bar, hearing from people who work in public interest law, and seeing that in fact you can use your law degree for good. You can use your law degree to to so-called help people. A lot of people do law for social justice purposes, and often we forget that as we go 5 years down the track and really practical issues like getting a job and securing an income come into play, and you can forget that and put that to the back of your mind. And one thing I learned from this conference was that you don't have to necessarily go into human rights law to be a human rights lawyer. You can work at a corporate firm, you can work in government, you can work at the bar, but still have your foot in these areas, take on public interest cases, work pro bono, do 1 day a week at a community legal centre, use the skills and experience you've developed in theory and put it into practice in a diverse area of law. I do think that the conference did try and bridge that gap between law as theory and the realities of practicing law. I guess at law school there is a big focus on black letter law and simply applying principles and rules that already exist, and you're not really looking so much at how we can change the law until you get to your final year subjects where you have electives and whatnot. However, the conference really did allow us to look at contentious domestic and international issues, issues such as whether homosexual couples should have the right to adoption, issues about internet regulation and state control of privacy rights, and other issues like this, where really the focus was what's the law like in practice. If I was to practice in this area of law, how can I make a change in this area of law? What are the avenues I can pursue? And so I think from a practical and informative respect, it did give you an insight as to what the law is in that area and how you can, as an advocate or as a litigator or as an academic, pursue that area of law, even though in theory it's just a bunch of rules and principles that you're applying every day. The fact that the conference is trying to bridge the gap or break down the boundary between I guess law in theory and law in practice, and in doing that raising awareness of human rights issues that are faced by particularly minority Australians, different ethnic groups. We have our Indigenous populations, and the rights that refugees should have, and the whole debacle with detention centres, for example, with refugees and asylum seekers. These are all issues that were raised in the conference in different fora, whether it was workshops or lectures, and small group discussions. I think that it's really important that the conference did this, because it's showing how through our legal skills that we've gained by studying law, and by the different avenues of law and careers open to us, that we can then defend the rights of these minority groups, or we can work towards bettering policy, say for refugees. We can work at the Refugee Advice and Casework Service and assist those who need to put in an application to the Refugee Review Tribunal. We can work with Indigenous populations with their land rights claims, or stolen wages or stolen generation claims. And that's part of the multicultural Australia that we live in. We have different people with different rights and different claims. And the conference tried to touch on the different groups in our society and look at how we can help break down the boundaries with each of those. The vibe of the conference was really positive. Everyone was there to learn how they can go back and make a change, whether it's in their own communities or through the study and practice of law in the future. I think the good thing about the conference is that it brought together a wide range of people from eclectic backgrounds all around Australia. We had people represented from Darwin, we had people from Tasmania, and it was fantastic to meet different law students who all have this passion for social justice, this burning passion which really allowed them to partake in and participate in the discussions that we had.